extremely useful. And of recent year, I've been with a organization that teaches nonviolent communication or compassionate communication. So I'm doing NVC right now pretty regularly. I love it. It's just really powerful. One thing I remember about my mom is that because I was overseas during years, I missed a lot of grammar. So mom would work with me on my grammar, and I would correct Kimberly all the time on grammar, you know, how to say certain things, like when you say, instead of my brother and me, I would say, no, my brother and I. You always put the other person first, and I'm doing that with them. But anyway, Kim said Brandon would just go berserk because Kimberly would continue to correct his grammar. Or not berserk, but just like, wow, why do you do that? Well, my dad did it to me. Always correcting grammar, but and Mom did that. She just taught us to use good grammar. And I'm hoping, as an attorney, that Kimberly's probably benefited from that, teaching her good, to not only write, but to speak eloquently or
she's
properly.
bought software that does it, right?
Or software now, yeah. I'm the hardware.
Yeah.
Yeah,
you
Mom was
are.
the same way.
Yep.
Huh?
Always, yeah.
Yeah.
Mom was always doing that too.
Grammar.
Correcting grammar.
Spelling, grammar.
Yeah.
I think it really
Dragonfly.
helps your
Yeah.
people's perception of you.
Sure it does.
And maybe if you don't have everything you need up there, at least if you sound like you do, it's helpful.
Yeah. It's like Kim saying she learns how to fake it until she makes them.
Go a long way with sounding like you know what you're doing.
If you say that as a lawyer, you still have to try to fake it like you.
Oh,
Yeah.
fake it till you make it.
Fake it till you make it.
Mostly faking it till you make
Yeah.
it.
All right, Gary.
Also in 1980, it must have been something happening then. Actually, I drove up from Richmond to Washington, D.C. for the EST course too, and got thrown out the opening night.
No.
Did you know that story?
Yes, I do.
I didn't know.
Because I was a journalist, and even though I sincerely wanted to take the course, they thought I was a subversive writer who was going to expose them. So even though I assured them I would not, they threw me out. So I had 8 passengers.
Because
in
they
this.
ask you what your profession
So I had to drive them back that night and say, you got to find another way up there and home the next night. Anyway, but in 1980 I was really adrift, and my children know this now, but at the time I tried to shelter them from the fact that there were great dark ages between Ambassador College, which left us somewhat unemployable, and then finally finding a career, about a 10-year period of drifting. And, you know, I was without a job and in somewhat legal trouble with the IRS, getting out of Tom Williams' little company in Richmond, Virginia, trying to find work. And
How old were you?
I was 35, and answering a blind ad in the New York Times. I very seldom got the Times, but I would go to a newsstand and browse through it and copy some numbers. But I responded to an ad there for an editor of an economic newsletters. It's a Canadian publisher named Patrick Garrard. And I wrote to this blind box. He actually flew down to Richmond to interview me, because all I did was send some samples of my writing from Plain Truth and my newsletters. And he really liked what he saw, and he hired me. And he introduced me to, I became, by the way, Mr. X, the famous advisor to millionaires who knew the secrets of the world and how it worked.
And you're not going to share them with us
Oh, no.
now? No?
You gotta subscribe.
Yeah.
That's right.
And he introduced me to a series, and it just became a domino series of great employers, libertarian philosophers like Robert Kephart of
They own
personal
publishing
finance.
companies.
Yeah, they all own publishers' companies, and then Thomas L. Phillips and James U. Blanchard III, and I began to work for all of them in sequence over the next 35 years, and began to meet all of these movers and shakers in this alternative investment newsletter industry, of which I became kind of a leading writer and editor in the field. So it's all came from a desperate time in my life answering a blind ad in the New York Times. So that really was the midway point. You know, and you think of Dante's Inferno, where it begins. I was at a deep abyss in the midway point of my life, you know, in an inferno.
You could not see the light at the end of the tunnel.
And there it was, you know, a blind ad from a Canadian publisher who flies down to see me. You know?
Yeah.
Wow.
Amazing.
That definitely was a game changer.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
get thrown out of
Which
est.
says a lot about you, by the way, Gary.
Or my writing samples.
Well, they kind of are one and the same.
Yes,
aren't they?
really,
of course.
truly. Well, I have to say for this guy, he, for all his talents and gifts, he did not believe in himself for a long time.
She did believe in me.
And I just couldn't imagine somebody with so many gifts and talents couldn't see that incredible future that was waiting for him.
Anybody know anybody else like that? All of us.
Yeah.
Because there's always those dark tunnels from time to time in one's life, from junior high on, and it's just what life's all about. And the challenge of life, and hopefully you've got, I've had my siblings and so, but hopefully you've got people in life that are going to encourage you. You find a book to read. That's a lot of stuff that helped me through life at times, is finding great books to read to help me understand the process of growing up and maturing. But you get in that tunnel and just you gotta keep believing there is light at the end of that tunnel. There is going to be a solution, and you just keep looking for it, and you keep networking, you keep seeking and reading, and you got the internet now, you can Google for anything. So it'll happen again and again, and don't be I know you'll be discouraged, but just know there's going to be light at the end of that tunnel.
This too shall pass.
One of the great centering and anchoring presences in my life was that I had a daughter. Because I went through the dark places and thought of ending my life a number of times. And it really was that I needed to be here for my daughter, that I knew I couldn't do that. I wouldn't do that to her in my own life. But it was that bleak when I left Ambassador College and that church and all. And so Kimberly has been for me an anchor, and one that has kept me. I always wanted to try to be the kind of example of a male that she could honor. And that's one of the things I always wanted to do. I never made a lot of money, and I had, went from pillar to post on jobs, never had many. But always wanted to treat her with dignity, compassion, and certainly support her. So that's kind of what Kimberly's been for me, that
light.
Yeah, that centering thing that's kept me going. And it's kind of together. I keep it together, John, keep it together.
My kids too.
Yeah,
Yep.
I was going down that road too. My first experience of being on my own was at Western College for Women, which was a really fairly prestigious women's college in southern Ohio, and Dad insisted that I go there, but it was quite eclectic, women from all over the world, small campus, intellectual, brought in poets and activists and musicians. It was just an amazing experience. And then, without going into any more detail, got back from Africa. Mother and Dad were getting a divorce, and the love of my life at that point was dying of a rare blood disease, and so I decided to go to Ambassador College. So I went to Ambassador College, and it was a wonderful experience, and then graduated and had the same minister and his wife match me up with Harold Williams. And I had my doubts, but we married and had 3 children rather quickly. For some reason, I had never imagined myself as a mother. I was going down the intellectual path and was going to go on for a doctorate. I thought I wanted to go to Union Theological Seminary in New York City. I don't know if I ever told you that. And then we divorced, and I had these 3 little kids. From the birth of Deborah to birth of Amy, it was 3 years, so then I had my tubes tied. And anyway, I remember being in a counseling session and going through that divorce, and the counselor said, I was in there by myself, and he said, okay, I'm going to set down 3 little chairs. And he said, this is Deborah. And this is Jonathan, and this is Amy, and I want you to talk to each one of them. And talk to them about why you want to be their mother. And so at that point, I made a very conscious decision that my contribution to the world were my 3 kids. And man, we went through thick and thin. And I went on and got 2 more college degrees and taught full time, and we got through it. So that was a not just having 3 children, because it seemed like, geez, where'd these kids come from? All of a sudden I've got 3 kids. But in that very moment, I've never forgotten those 3 little chairs and making a very clear choice on my part that nobody else was going to rear these kids. They're my kids, and I want them to have all of this, and I am going to make sure they have it. So, yeah.
Yay, Mary!
Anybody else want to add to that?
I feel like my life, because of this guy, has just been kind of this steady stream of continuity. I mean, there were certainly a lot of lessons to learn. We had to learn to work together as a team. And you talk about, you're correcting your daughter's grammar or whatever. Well, because of the way I think our father taught us, I thought, well, if someone doesn't know something, you teach them, Well, he grew
Your
up...
own personal Googleplex.
That's my walking Google. Well, for what I was for him, from my perception, is because, when I got married, I had no idea that families could raise kids so differently. And we were raised, no girl chores, no boy chores, everybody worked together with teamwork and all that. But his family was totally different. There were the outdoor chores, that was Dad. The indoor chores were Mom. He did not like outdoor stuff. He didn't like all that stuff, but he wasn't allowed to cook or learn how to cook or, do stuff on the inside. His mother truly ruled the kitchen and ruled, the interior household. And so then we get married, and I'm all ready for teamwork. We're all going to do this together. And like, well, I don't think so. So that was a big challenge. So I'm trying to teach him things in the kitchen and deal with his resentment of that. And backing off and going, okay, so how do you do this? I mean, how do you, I think it's fun. I think it's fun to learn to do this and do this as a team. But he thinks I'm the bossy older sister, because he has an older sister who was very bossy. And so it took me a long time to finally get that I had to figure out another way to teach him things he didn't know and didn't think he wanted to learn. But I knew he wanted to learn.
How'd it work out the last 10 years?
Oh, since we moved here, I think moving here for him was he didn't have to drive the Washington Beltway anymore, which was a horrible commute, coming and going. He had to wear a suit and tie. He's never been a suit and tie guy.